cytogenetics, right? See, cytogenetics is that branch that basically looks at the cell component, right? So it looks at the structure, the organization, the functioning, right, of the cell. Um, so what are the kind of cells? So what are the kind of roles that it plays, right? So the serogenetics was more about the hormonal sort of regulations, okay, which hormone basically does what kind of thing. Now we are basically talking in terms of like which cell does what kind of works, right? So that is that. So cytogenetics is the branch of genetics that deals with the cellular components that are involved in reproduction process. Okay. So how do we know what is what? Okay. Take a look at this particular sort of a flow chart, right? So testes is characterized by the following cell population. So what do we have here? So testicular cell populations can be divided into two. One is the germinal cells and the other is the non-germinal cells. Now within the non-germinal cells, okay, so there's a classification. Okay. So I want to talk about three different kind of cells here, right? The first cell is going to be Sertoli cells. Second one is going to be Leydig or interstitial cells, and the third one is going to be your germinal cells, which is important for that spermatogenesis, right? So spermatogenesis. So we'll take a look at all of these. So the first one was what? The first one was your Sertoli cells. Now you guys remember what is Sertoli cells, right? FSH basically stimulates the Sertoli cells, and Sertoli cells essentially help in the production of sperm. Okay, so this is your Sertoli cells, right? Now, what I'm doing here is that we are going a little more in depth into the testicular region, right? So this is essentially the testes. So what you see on the left side is basically the testes, and what you see on the right hand side is like the cross section of it, right? So this is the cross section of it. Okay, so just take a second, take a look at this. See, so a testes can be divided into many different parts. Okay, so each part is basically called, so there are many parts, okay, they are called lobules, okay, and each of those are made up of these things called seminiferous tubules, okay, and that is that. The reason why I want to mention this is that, you know, these tubules are kind of important from for a reason, okay, and that reason is that this is where these are the ones that basically act as sperm factories. Okay, these are the ones that basically act as sperm factories. Okay, so seminiferous tubules are basically a network of the small tubes in the testes. Okay, and this is where the sperms are produced, and this is where the sperms are maturing. Okay, this is where they are produced. Okay, and this is where it is maturing. So what does it do exactly? So the Sertoli cells again, so if you remember, we said FSH basically helps in stimulation of the Sertoli cells. Sertoli cells basically helps in the providing nourishment and structural support to the sperm, right? So it helps in the providing nourishment and the structural support to the sperm. So Sertoli cells are those that are responsible for providing what? The structural and nutritional support to these developing sperm cells. Okay, so FSH stimulates the Sertoli cells. Sertoli cells are responsible for your production of the sperm. Okay, is that clear? First kind of cell. So what have we covered right now? So we basically talk about first one Sertoli cells, second one is the Leydig or interstitial cells, and the third one is going to be the germinal cells, right? So any question with regard to the Sertoli cells or its functioning? Great. Okay, so all of you are able to understand the functioning of the uh, Sertoli cells. Okay. Next is going to be your second one, which is the Leydig cells or the interstitial cells. So what did we say? LLIT, right? So LLIT was what? So you have your luteinizing hormone, which is responsible for stimulating of the Leydig cells or the interstitial cells in what? In testosterone sort of production, right? So that is that. Okay, great. Okay. So Sertoli cells, so regulated by the FSH. Yeah, very clearly, right? So Sertoli cells basically regulated by the FSH, which means that there is interaction with the follicle stimulating hormone, which results in the stimulation of the Sertoli cells, right? So Sertoli cells eventually will result in, nourishing and structurally sort of supporting the developing sperm cells, right? So this is important because this helps in the proper maturation of those sperm cells. Okay, so good question, and you were right. Okay, by the way, your question was correct. So this is the second one, which is going to be the Leydig cells. See, Leydig cell or interstitial sort of cells, right? So Leydig cells. So Leydig cells are basically situated in the interstitial tissue of the testes, right? So if you see this here, so you can see the sky blue color here. That is where you have the Leydig cells that are present. Okay, that is where they are kind of present, right? So interstitial essentially means so the meaning of interstitial essentially means like in between, Okay, it means in between. So testicular interstitial cells, in anatomy and biology, it basically means that there are certain kind of cells that are found between the seminiferous tubules that you can see here. So these are the cross section of the, so this is one seminiferous tubule, and you can see everything in orange and pink is basically a seminiferous tubule. So in between those gaps, what do we have here? We basically have these Leydig cells or the interstitial cells. These Leydig cells, upon stimulation by the luteinizing hormone, okay, helps in the secretion of testosterone, production and secretion of testosterone, which is a key male sort of hormone. Is that clear? Okay, so this is what your Leydig cells is. So what is the location? Location is between the spaces between the seminiferous tubules, right? What is the function? One of the important sort of function is the testosterone production, right? So Leydig cells will play a very important role in the production of testosterone, the main sort of a male sex hormone. It is regulated by LH. Okay, the Leydig cells respond to the luteinizing hormone that is released by the pituitary glands, right? So with this, it is going to help in synthesizing and secreting of that testosterone into the bloodstream. Okay, so this particular process will ensure the maintenance of the testosterone levels at a proper level. Okay, and that is kind of important, right, for the development of the male characteristics that we talked about: facial hair, deeper voice, muscle mass, all of that, right? So testosterone is a very important sort of component. So in summary, Sertoli cells are integral for supporting sperm production, okay, and regulated by FSH. Second one was Leydig cells. Okay, this basically specializes in testosterone production. Okay, they respond to, or they're regulated by the LH. Okay, both of these things together help in the coordination and the proper working of the male reproductive system properly. Is that clear? The third component that we can take a look at in terms of the cells, okay, cytogenetics is about the cells. So the third one we can take a look at is going to be the germinal cells. Okay, the next one is going to be the germinal cells. Okay, the next one we can talk about is the germinal cells. All good? The best way to explain this is through this particular diagram here. Okay, so germinal cells. See, germinal cells are those cells that are located in the testes that give rise to sperm through a process called spermatogenesis that we've been talking about for a little bit. So what is your spermatogenesis? See, spermatogenesis is the process through which sperm is basically produced through a series of steps. Okay, and what are those steps? Actually, the steps that are involved in spermatogenesis is something that we can see in this coming slide. If you guys can see the picture here, okay, so you can take a look at your the diagram in your handout, right? See, the very first step is that we start with something called the spermatogonium. So this is the step of spermatogenesis, right? So what we see here is going to be spermatogonium, right? So spermatogonium, or in plural it is called spermatogonia, right? So those in the testes basically undergo mitosis. Okay, it's one type of a cell division in which if you have a 2n, it is going to divide into 2n and 2n. Can you see that here? You have a 2n and it basically divides into 2n and 2n, right? So it is basically divided into a 2n and a 2n, right? So that is basically what you see. So in this step, okay, the next step, what you see here is 2n basically dividing into n and n, and that further dividing into n, 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 n. What does that remind you? Okay, do you remember meiosis, right? So 2n dividing into n and n, and then 4 sort of daughter cells, right? So you remember this one, right? So then you essentially start seeing that there is going to be meiosis here. So the step number 1 was what? Spermatogonium or spermatogonia, right? Which is a type of a male germ cell or a stem cell, okay, which will give rise to sperm cells throughout the life, right? So this creation or the production of the sperm cell is a process called spermatogenesis. So the first step is basically what? The mitosis. Okay, so we see 2n basically dividing into 2n and 2n. Okay, so we started with spermatogonium and we are now in the primary spermatocyte position, right? So we are in the primary spermatocyte position. So from primary spermatocyte, what we have is meiosis 1, in which it's going to divide into n and n, right? So that is your meiosis stage 1. So in this, after a primary spermatocyte has basically undergone that, we are going to call this what? So we are going to call this secondary spermatocyte. Okay, we are going to call this secondary spermatocyte. Okay, so I've given you this in a little bit of I've given you two different versions of this. I've given you a detailed version for you to understand this and to be able to understand and appreciate this. I've also given you at the bottom, a very short, crisp version that you can basically fatafat write and make your answer, or you can sort of incorporate it, okay, in very short 4 or 5 steps, right? But I've given you a detailed version also so that you can understand. But it's still been sort of like written in very simple terms that you will be able to understand better. Okay, is that clear? So far, so good. Okay, then we basically move on to the next step, which is the secondary spermatocyte undergoing another sort of meiosis. Meiosis stage two, right? It is basically undergoing meiosis stage two, right? So in this, basically, what you have is that it is going to sort of divide into N and N, basically four daughter cells, right? So and all of them are going to be haploid, right? So that is basically what you see this. Do we have to draw this? You can draw this. Okay. So if you see the boxes here, you can actually fill this out in your boxes. Okay, so those that I've given you. Okay, so we are in meiosis stage two, right? So now basically what we are going to do is that we have to sort of get from your secondary spermatocyte, okay, to the next stage, which is going to be the spermatid stage. So secondary spermatocytes essentially proceed through this meiosis stage two, okay, in which it is going to result in the creation of what you see here, four haploid spermatids, right? So N, right? So that is essentially what you see. And these spermatids, right, they possess because it is haploid, right? So because it is meiosis, right? So you know that it is going to contain half the number of chromosomes, right? So instead of 46, it is going to contain 23, right? So not 23 pairs, it is going to be 23. So this is very, very important, because we have to sort of have that diploid sort of status during fertilization. So that is essentially what you see here. Now you might think that, hey, spermatids, it is all kind of ready. Actually, it is almost ready. Okay, it is almost ready, but not 100% ready. Okay, it is almost ready, but not 100%. So these spermatids, the stage that you see here, the spermatid wala stage mein, they are still so they are small, but they are immature male germ cells. Okay, it is they are produced during the spermatogenesis as in the intermediate stage, okay, in this particular stage here. And eventually one more step it has to undergo in order to basically sort of develop into mature sperm cells, right? So everything is good, but it is still not mature yet. Okay, so mature sperm cells ke liye, you have basically one more step that you have to go through, and that step is basically your, if you can see this here, spermiogenesis. Okay, the next stage is basically your spermiogenesis. Okay, the next stage is basically your spermiogenesis. Okay, so spermiogenesis is nothing. It is basically just the transformation of the spermatids, which is the immature sort of sperm cells, into the mature sperm cell form. Okay, and in the mature sperm cell form, what do you see here? Can you see this here, like a bulbous kind of a structure on top? Then you basically see the mid piece. Okay, I'll tell you what it is. It basically has the mitochondria here, and then you basically see the tail here, right? So all of these kind of portions that are present here. So this is the simple sort of sperm anatomy, right? So you have a tail and with a plasma membrane and all of that, and then you basically have the mid piece. Mid piece basically contains a mitochondria, or a mitochondrion in singular. Okay, a spiral shaped sort of a mitochondrion it will basically contain, and this bulbous sort of shaped top is there, right? This is the head. The head basically contains the nucleus in which you have the 23 chromosomes here. Apart from that, you have some enzymes and all of that, which I'll come to in just a little bit, right? So you guys can just take a look. So while you guys note this down, I'll just summarize this whole process. So spermatogenesis is a complex and continuous process, okay, of sperm cell production, which begins at birth. I guess it's not at birth. It begins at puberty, okay, and persists through a male's life. Okay, so there is a proper sort of a sequence that follows. Okay, and this ensures the formation of proper, mature, and functional spermatozoa. Spermatozoa essentially is the final mature sperm cell, okay, which is capable of fertilizing an egg, when it comes. So what are the stages here? So if you start from the very first stage, you can basically see that spermatogonium or the spermatogonia, right? So these are basically the germ cells called as spermatogonia, right? So these basically reside in the testes. They're undergoing mitosis in the very first step, generating more and more sort of spermatogonia, right? So these spermatogonia, they basically serve as the base, yeah, the foundation, or the inputs for the entire sort of process. Okay, and the process basically begins now. So now you basically have, okay, the formation of the primary spermatocytes. So some of the spermatogonia, right? So they progress into the primary spermatocytes. Okay, now from here you're going to initiate the first meiotic or the meiosis division one, right? So your stage one of your meiosis. So each primary spermatocyte yields secondary spermatocytes that you can see here at the next step, and these secondary spermatocytes basically are N and not 2N. Okay, they are haploid and not diploid. Then we proceed to the next stage, which is your meiosis 2, which is the production of the spermatids, right? So secondary spermatocytes. It's a long name, right? So secondary spermatocytes, they proceed through this particular round 2, meiosis stage 2, right? And this will basically result in the creation of haploid spermatids. How many of them? 4 haploid spermatids, right? So you have 4 haploid spermatids, right, in this particular process. So these spermatids possessed, half the chromosome number, okay, and they are just almost ready, but they are still immature, right? So you basically have to go through one more stage in order to sort of have a completely developed sort of a mature egg sperm cell, right? So what is a mature sperm cell? It basically contains a head, it has a midpiece, okay, and it basically contains a tail, right? So this basically, so from spermatids to spermatozoa or mature sperm cells, you have to undergo one more step, which is a spermiogenesis, right? So the spermatids basically undergo a process called spermiogenesis, okay, and which basically transforms the spermatids, okay, the immature sort of sperm cells, into mature sperm cells, the spermatozoa, okay, spermatids into spermatozoa, right? So you have to understand that there is an intricate sort of a differentiation that is here, right? Between the spermatids and the spermatozoa. And what is a spermatozoa? Spermatozoa basically contains some distinctive structures, which is the head, right, which contains the genetic material. It basically contains some enzymes called we'll come to the enzymes, okay, I'll tell you the purpose also, okay. Then it basically contains a tail. The tail is one that provides motility, right? It'll enable the sperm to sort of navigate the vaginal canal, the cervix, the entire uterus, and basically enter into the fallopian tubes and so on and so forth, right? So it has to be able to do that. So for that you need the tails, right? But how does it basically swim up, right, against the currents, right? So you basically have to have a little bit of energy, right? So for the energy, you basically have the middle piece that contains what? It contains the mitochondria or the mitochondrion, right? So to again to summarize, so this particular process of spermatogenesis, okay, it basically begins with the proliferation of the spermatogonia, okay, and then basically there is formation of primary spermatocytes through your meiosis stage 1, okay. Then basically through meiosis stage 2, you basically it yields 4 spermatids, if you can see here, right? So haploid, okay, and then there is a final transformation of these spermatids, which are nothing but your immature sperm cells, into mature sperm cells, right, into spermatozoa, okay. And this particular, the final stage is basically called the spermiogenesis. This transformation is basically called the spermiogenesis, right? So this kind of an intricate process, right, which happens with a lot of precision, right? This ensures that there is continuous sort of production of functional spermatozoa, okay, and that is kind of very, very important when it comes to that's basically what the male reproductive system is all about, right? So in order to succeed, you need to have functional spermatozoa, and it is sort of produced through this entire sort of process. Any questions in this? It's fairly straightforward, right? It's like an application of what we have seen in the past. So the way to sort of remember this is SPSSS. Okay, in case you want to remember it, I don't know if I've written this down anywhere. I guess I've not. Okay, so SPSSS. Let me just write this here. SPSSS. So what is this? So spermatogonium stage. Okay, and then you have the primary spermatocyte, secondary spermatocyte, spermatid, and then you eventually are going to finish it off with the spermatozoa or the mature sort of sperm, right? So mature sperm cell. So very, very simple. So I've studied this in school, but this is the first time I'm really understanding it. Okay, okay. Actually, school, you have a different sort of a purpose, right? Because you have a particular word limit, and I forget like exactly what was how you have to study it, or is you basically do it for marks, right? So here also it is for marks, but you have to understand, right? So there has to be this conceptual understanding. Only then you'll be able to address questions if and when there are analytical questions based on this, right? So now you understand if any sort of process goes wrong here, okay, and plus you will also understand the general sort of implication for humanity as a whole, right? So you will be able to sort of understand those components as well. If you go a little more into the spermatozoa, right, so which is the mature sperm cell, this is basically what you see here, right? So what you see here, you basically have the head, okay. In the head you have have your nucleus. The nucleus basically contains that haploid component, right? So the nucleus basically is going to contain 22 plus X, yeah, 22 plus Y, right? One of those things. And that when it finds another 22 plus X from the female, okay, from the egg, it basically sort of is able to sort of fertilize. Does that kind of make sense? Now, I've also written about acrosome. Okay, what is an acrosome? Acrosome is basically a set of enzyme that is present here. Okay, because it's not very easy to sort of like break through the layers of the egg, right? So the outer layer is basically the corona radiata, and inside that you basically, if you have sort of been able to penetrate through that, then you have the zona pellucida, and then you basically can enter into the egg and then find the nucleus and then fertilize. Okay, no joke, it's a very difficult job. Okay, the sperm that really reaches from the testes of the male through ejaculation, through the urethra, enters into the vagina, through the cervix, okay, through the entire uterus, and then into the fallopian tube, and then reaches, right? So it might even start with a million sperm cells. Okay, but by the time it actually goes through the very difficult sort of an environment of the woman's uterus, okay, very few actually are able to sort of make it to the final stages of that fallopian tube. Maybe it is like 100, right? I'm just giving you these arbitrary numbers, but I'm just trying to tell you that there is a huge reduction in the number of sperm cells that can actually do the job and succeed in order to get that fertilization. Why is it so difficult to get pregnant for families, right? And then eventually the ones that are able to sort of, and it is not only one sperm that basically gets to the egg, right? There are maybe like this, like a dozen, or maybe like around 100 or something like that, right? But even within that, there is only going to be one, okay, that is strong enough, okay, to be able to utilize that acrosome, okay, to be able to sort of use those enzymes in order to penetrate and then fertilize that egg. Okay, so it is no joke. Okay, that is really a case of survival of the fittest.